The stone walls of the well shaft held nothing but failure and the slow accumulation of 2 months' dust. But Vincent Frost sat in it anyway with his back against the cool rock and his eyes closed, listening to something no one else believed existed. Water moved somewhere beyond this limestone. He was certain of it, a whisper of flowing darkness that made his fingers itch and his throat tighten with the peculiar certainty of his trade. He was a dowser, a well digger, and a man who had walked away from 3 profitable contracts in settled country to chase rumors of dying grassland and desperate clans into the high desert where the air tasted of sage and stone. No one had hired him. No one had asked him to come. But the water was here, and Vincent had never been able to walk away from water that needed finding. Above the well shaft, the sun hammered the scrubland into submission. But down here in the narrow throat of his excavation, the temperature stayed mercifully cool. Vincent opened his eyes and studied the eastern wall where a seam of darker stone interrupted the pale limestone. He had been staring at that seam for 3 days, mapping its angle, calculating depth and pressure, and the dozen variables that separated hope from another dry hole. His tools lay scattered in the dust around him. Iron wedges, a sledge with a handle worn smooth by his palms, a pick that had broken more rock in the past 8 weeks than in the previous year combined. The sound came again, so faint it might have been imagination, but Vincent knew better. He pressed his palm flat against the dark seam and felt it, the distant tremor of moving water, and started to laugh. It was not the laugh of a sane man. He knew that, sitting alone at the bottom of a 40-foot hole in country where the last rain had fallen 4 months ago, and the nearest human settlement was 2 days' ride through land that belonged, by treaty and ancient claim, to the orc clans who grazed their herds across these dying ranges. He had seen them watching him. They made no secret of it. Orcs moved differently than humans, with a ground-eating stride and a stillness when they stopped that made them seem like extensions of the landscape itself. They came in 2s and 3s, sat their horses at a distance, and studied his work with the patience of people who had nowhere else to be and nothing to lose by waiting. Vincent had waved once early on and received no response. After that he had simply worked, hauling up bucket after bucket of stone chips and dust, descending each morning into the growing darkness, emerging each evening covered in grime and too tired to do more than eat cold beans and fall asleep under stars that looked close enough to touch. Now, with his hand against the seam and the sound of water in his ears, Vincent understood that he had been on trial. They had been deciding if he was a fraud or a miracle, and he was about to give them an answer. It took him 6 more hours to place the charges correctly. He had brought a small supply of blasting powder, expensive stuff purchased with the last of his savings in a border town where the merchant had looked at his destination and shaken his head. Vincent worked slowly, drilling the shot holes with a star drill and hammer, his shoulders burning with the effort, his hands steady despite the fatigue. The seam angled down and east, following a fault line that logic said should intersect with the aquifer he had been tracking since he first walked this land with his divining rod and felt the pull of deep water. He set the fuses long, climbed out of the well shaft with his arms shaking, and walked 100 yards upwind before lighting the match. The explosion was a muffled thump, deep and almost apologetic, followed by a rising column of dust that climbed lazily into the evening sky. Vincent waited, counting heartbeats, and then he heard it. A new sound, a rushing that built and built until it echoed up from the well shaft like the voice of the earth itself. When he reached the edge and looked down, water was pooling at the bottom, clear and cold and rising fast. Vincent Frost sat down hard in the dust, his legs suddenly unable to hold him, and watched his gamble pay off. The aquifer was bigger than he had hoped, the pressure stronger, the flow abundant enough to transform this dying scrubland into something that could sustain life. He had found it. He had opened it. And he had done it for people who had never asked, on land where he had no claim, for reasons he could not fully articulate even to himself. The orcs arrived before dawn. Vincent woke to the sound of hoofbeats and sat up from his bedroll to find himself surrounded. There were perhaps 20 of them, mounted on sturdy horses that stood quietly in the half-light. The orcs themselves were tall, green-skinned, their tusks small and white against darker lips. They wore leather and wool, practical clothing suited to hard living, and they watched him with expressions he could not read. An older woman dismounted. Her hair was iron gray, bound back in a thick braid, and her eyes were the color of amber. She walked to the well shaft, looked down into the water that now stood 8 feet deep and still rising, and then turned to Vincent with an expression that might have been wonder or grief or something that contained both. "You have opened the old vein," she said. Her voice was deep, accented, careful with each word. "The stories said it was here, beneath the stone. My grandmother's grandmother knew this place when water ran on the surface." Vincent stood, acutely aware that he was outnumbered, unarmed, and entirely at the mercy of people whose customs he did not understand. "It is a good aquifer," he said, because it was true and because he could think of nothing else to say. "Strong flow, clean water. It will need a proper well head, a pump or a windlass, channels to distribute it, but the water is here. It will not fail." The woman studied him for a long moment. "You are the dowser who came walking out of the east. We thought you would dig one hole, find nothing, and leave. Then you dug another hole and another. You have been here 8 weeks, 9, Vincent said. It took time to map the aquifer. No one hired you, no one promised you payment." Vincent smiled, a small, tired expression. "No." The woman turned and spoke in her own language, a rolling cascade of syllables that Vincent could not follow. The other orcs responded, some dismounting, others leaning forward in their saddles. The conversation went on for several minutes, and Vincent stood awkwardly, aware that his fate was being discussed and that he had no voice in the matter. Finally, the older woman turned back to him. "I am Kelda, elder of the clan that holds these grazing runs. You have given us water, dowser, and that is a debt we cannot leave unpaid. Our herds were dying. In another month we would have had to drive them south into lands where we have no treaty, no rights. You have saved us. Do you understand what that means?" Vincent hesitated. "I am glad the water will help." "Help." Kelda repeated the word as if tasting it. "The water you have opened is worth more than our entire herd. It is worth more than anything we can offer. By our custom, a debt that cannot be paid in goods must be paid in kinship. Do you understand?" "No," Vincent admitted. Kelda gestured, and a younger woman dismounted. She was perhaps 25, tall and strong, with green skin that seemed to hold the morning light and eyes the color of dark moss. She wore her black hair loose, and there was something both proud and resigned in the way she stood. "This is my daughter's daughter, Mira. She is unmarried, a skilled herder, strong and healthy. She will settle the debt." Vincent looked at the younger woman, saw the careful absence of expression on her face, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I do not understand," he said again, though he was beginning to fear that he did. Kelda's voice was formal now, ritual. "You have given us water, dowser. We offer you kinship. Mira will bear your sons, and they will belong to both peoples. The debt will be paid, and you will have a place among us if you wish it, or you may leave with our gratitude and our protection through these lands." The silence that followed was broken only by the restless movement of horses and the distant cry of a hawk. Vincent looked at Mira Kelstrath and saw the set of her shoulders, the careful dignity, the resignation of someone who had been handed a duty and would fulfill it because her people needed her to. He thought of a dozen things to say and discarded them all as inadequate. Mira lowered her eyes, and when she spoke her voice was quiet but steady. "Let me bear your sons, dowser. I will be a good wife. I will honor the debt." Vincent took 3 steps forward, moving slowly so as not to startle her, and held out his hand. She looked at it, confused, and then up at his face. "I would rather you stayed to argue with me about pipe grades," Vincent said quietly, "and pump mechanisms, and where to dig the channels so the water reaches the best grazing first. I need someone who knows this land, who understands the herds, who can tell me which springs failed and which still trickle. If you are willing, I would rather have your partnership than settle a debt I never meant to create." Mira stared at him. Behind her, the assembled orcs had gone very still. "Take my hand," Vincent said, and kept his voice gentle. "As an equal if you are willing, not as payment." She took his hand. Her grip was strong, her palm calloused from rain, leather, and hard work, and in her eyes Vincent saw the first spark of something that was not resignation. Kelda's voice was sharp as flint. "You refuse the custom." Vincent turned, still holding Mira's hand. "I did not come here to collect payment, Elder. I came here to find water. The water is found. If your custom demands a debt be paid, then let me pay you instead. I have 2 hands, a strong back, and skills you need. Let me help you build what this water makes possible. Channels, cisterns, headgates. I will work a season, and we will call it even." The silence that followed was longer and more dangerous. Kelda's face was unreadable, but around her the other orcs had begun to mutter among themselves. Vincent held his ground, still holding Mira's hand, and tried not to think about how badly this could go wrong. Finally, Kelda spoke in her own language, a long, flowing sentence that was met with more muttering, some gestures of agreement, others of clear disapproval. When she turned back to Vincent, her expression was carved from stone. "You insult us, dowser. The debt is ours, not yours. We offer you kinship, and you refuse it. Mira is not unworthy. She is strong and wise and of good family. You insult her." "No," Vincent kept his voice level. "I honor her. She deserves to be chosen, not assigned. If she comes to know me and chooses me freely, then I would be proud beyond measure. But not like this. Not as payment for something I did not do for payment." Mira's hand tightened on his, and when he glanced at her, her eyes were bright and hard to read. Kelda's jaw was set, her displeasure obvious, but there was something else in her expression now, a calculating assessment. "You are a strange man, Vincent Frost. You come to our land uninvited, you open water we thought lost, you refuse payment, and you offer labor instead. This is not how debts are settled." "Then teach me how," Vincent said simply. "I will follow your custom if you will teach me. But let me earn what I am given, and let those who give it choose freely." The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. Vincent was sent to sit by his well, out of earshot, while the clan argued. He could see them, a circle of orcs in heated discussion, gestures flying, voices rising and falling. Mira stood among them, speaking when called upon, listening intently, and once she turned to look at him with an expression he could not decipher. When they finally came for him, the sun was high and hot, and Vincent's mouth was dry with more than thirst. Kelda stood before him flanked by 2 other elders, a man with scars across his jaw and a woman whose hair was pure white. "We have discussed your offer, dowser. It is irregular, and it leaves the debt unsettled in a way that troubles us. But Mira has spoken, and she says she will see if you are a fool or a man of honor. She says you should be given the chance to prove yourself. "Thank you," Vincent said, and meant it. "Do not thank me yet. You will work for the clan, yes. You will build the channels and the cisterns. You will share your knowledge. You will labor as one of us. But you will do it correctly. You will live among us, eat at our fires, learn our ways. At the end of a season, when the water runs and the work is done, the debt will be judged again. If Mira chooses you then, and you still wish it, you will marry by our custom and yours both, and the debt will be closed. If she does not choose you, or you do not choose her, you will leave with our gratitude and the debt will be settled by other means. Do you accept these terms?" Vincent met Mira's eyes across the space between them and saw the question there, the uncertainty and the first fragile growth of hope. "I accept. Then it is decided. You will begin today." The work was harder than anything Vincent had attempted in his life. The clan's camp was a sprawling collection of felt tents and stone corrals located 3 miles west of the well, positioned to catch the evening breeze and sheltered by a ridge of red sandstone. Vincent was given a small tent near the edge of the camp, a bedroll, and a place at the communal fires. He was not treated as a guest. He was treated as what he had claimed to be, a worker, a member of the labor pool, someone who would earn his place through sweat and competence. Mira became his partner in the work, not by romantic design but by practical necessity. She knew the land, the herds, the clan's needs. Vincent knew water engineering, the principles of flow and grade that would turn a raw aquifer into a functioning water system. Together, they planned the channels that would carry water from the well to the grazing lands, mapped the locations for cisterns that would hold reserves against future drought, calculated the size and placement of headgates that would control distribution. She was not easy to work with. Mira had opinions, strong ones, and she did not defer to Vincent's expertise without questions. She challenged his plans, pushed back against his assumptions, demanded to understand the reasoning behind every decision. Their first real argument came in the second week, standing in the hot sun above a half-dug channel, and it was about slope. "The grade is too steep," Mira said, arms crossed. "The water will run too fast, cut the channel deeper, wash out the lower end." "The grade is correct for the flow rate," Vincent countered. "If we flatten it, the water will slow, silt will build up, we will spend half our time dredging. You do not know this soil. It is soft here, loose. Fast water will destroy it." "Then we line the channel with stone where the soil is soft." "That is twice the work." "It is the right work." They glared at each other, both breathing hard, and then Mira shook her head and laughed, a surprised sound. "You are stubborn, dowser. So are you, herder. Good. I was worried you would be easy to manage." She grinned, showing her tusks, and Vincent found himself grinning back. They lined the channel with stone where the soil was soft, and the grade held, and the water ran clean and fast and did not wash out. Vincent learned to listen to Mira's knowledge of the land, and Mira learned to trust Vincent's understanding of water. They made a good team, and the work progressed. The clan accepted him slowly. The children were the first, curious and bold, coming to watch him work and asking endless questions. Vincent showed them how a level worked, how to cite a grade, how to read the land for the secrets it held. The herders came next, practical people who cared more about results than customs. When the first channel began to carry water to a grazing area that had been dry for years, and the grass began to green in its path, the herders started to nod to Vincent when they passed, to offer him tea at the evening fires. The elders were slower. Kelda watched him with eyes that missed nothing, testing him in small ways. She asked him to help repair a corral, and he worked until the job was done right. She asked his opinion on moving the camp, and he deferred to her greater knowledge while offering thoughts on water access. She asked him once, why he had come to this place at all, and Vincent told her the truth. He had heard about the drought, about the dying herds, and he could not walk away from water that needed finding. "Why?" Kelda asked, and her voice was genuinely curious. "These are not your people. This is not your land." Vincent was silent for a moment, trying to find words for something he had never fully articulated. "Water does not belong to anyone," he said finally. "It belongs to itself, but people need it to live, and I know how to find it. Leaving it lost when I could find it felt like waste. Like sin, maybe. I am not a religious man, Elder, but I believe some gifts are meant to be used." Kelda studied him for a long time. "You are an odd man, Vincent Frost, but perhaps an honest one, we will see." Mira thawed more slowly and in more complicated ways. She worked beside him every day, and they fell into an easy partnership, but she held herself separate in all the small ways that mattered. She did not sit beside him at the fires. She did not seek him out when the work was done. She was polite, professional, and distant, and Vincent understood that he was still being weighed, judged, measured against a standard he could not see. He did not push. He worked, he learned the clan's ways, he proved himself useful. When the children asked him to tell stories, he told them about rivers and springs and the strange behavior of water underground. When the herders needed an extra hand moving the cattle, he saddled up and rode with them, learning to work the half-wild beasts that were the clan's wealth. When the cook fires needed tending, he took his turn without complaint. And he watched Mira, when he thought she would not notice, and tried to understand the woman who had been offered to him as payment and who now worked beside him as a partner she had not chosen. She was strong, that was obvious, with the kind of lean muscle that came from a lifetime of hard work. She moved with easy confidence, comfortable in her own skin, whether she was wrestling a stubborn calf or calculating flow rates for a new cistern. She was smart, her questions sharp and her grasp of engineering principles faster than Vincent's own had been when he was learning. She was funny, in a dry way, her humor catching him off guard and making him laugh at unexpected moments. And she was lonely, he thought. There was something isolated in her, a distance she maintained even among her own people. He asked about it once, carefully, while they were working side by side on a cistern wall. "You do not spend much time with the other young people in the clan." Mira's hands stilled on the stone she was shaping. "No." "Why not?" She was quiet for long enough that he thought she would not answer. Then, "I am the elder's granddaughter. People see me differently, and I was promised once before to a man from another clan. It fell through. After that, people were careful with me, as if I were breakable or unlucky." "What happened?" "With the first promise, I mean, if it is not rude to ask." "It is rude, but I will tell you anyway." Mira's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands gripped the stone harder than necessary. "He saw me, decided I was not attractive enough, and broke the agreement. He said I was too plain, too tall, too marked by work. He wanted a woman who looked softer, more decorative. His clan supported him. My clan was humiliated, and I was left with a reputation as the girl no one wanted. So when you came and the debt was owed and grandmother said I would settle it, I thought, this is what I am worth, payment for water, that is all." Vincent set down his tools very carefully. "Mira, do not pity me, I am not damaged, I am practical. I understood what was being asked, and I would have done it because my people needed it. But then you refused, and I did not know what to think. I still do not know what to think." "Think that you deserve to be chosen for yourself," Vincent said quietly. "Think that any man who called you plain was a fool. Think that I would like to know you as yourself, not as a debt settlement." Mira looked at him then, really looked, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or anger or hope. "You are strange, Vincent Frost." "So I have been told." She turned back to her work, but Vincent caught the hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth, and he counted it as progress. The season turned. The channels reached farther, the cisterns grew, and the land began to transform. Green spread outward from the waterways in a widening fan, and the clan's herds grew sleek and fat. Vincent's body hardened from the labor, his hands grew new calluses on top of old, and his skin darkened from the sun. He learned to speak some of the clan's language, halting and grammatically uncertain, but enough to make the elders smile and the children giggle at his accent. And Mira began to seek him out. It started small. She sat beside him at the fire one evening, not speaking, just sharing the space. A few nights later she brought him tea, passing him a battered metal cup without comment. When he thanked her, she shrugged and said the night was cold, and everyone deserved hot tea on a cold night. They began to talk in the evenings after the work was done. At first it was about the project, discussing the next day's labor, refining plans, solving problems. But gradually the conversations ranged wider. Mira told him about growing up in the clan, about learning to ride before she could walk properly, about the stories her grandmother told of the old days when the water ran free and the grass grew chest-high. Vincent told her about his own childhood in a farming village, about learning to dowse from a wandering water witch who had stopped for a season, about the moment he first felt the pull of hidden water and knew he had found his calling. "You miss it?" Mira asked one night. "Your village, your people," Vincent considered the question. "I miss some things. My mother makes excellent bread. My brother is good company when he is not being an idiot, but I left for a reason. They wanted me to marry a girl from the next farm, settle down, dig wells for neighbors, and never wonder what else was out there. I wanted more, or different anyway. I wanted to see what I could find. And now you are here in the dust, working for people who are not your own." "Now I am here," Vincent agreed, "working with people I am coming to respect, maybe even like. It is different from what I imagined, but it is good." Mira was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "When I was a child, I wanted to be a warrior. The clans used to raid each other, generations ago, and there were great fighters, heroes. I wanted to be like them. But those days are gone. Now we are herders, and the fighting we do is against drought and distance and the slow shrinking of our lands. It is not glorious, but it is real. I have learned to value real things. Like water," Vincent said. "Like water." Mira smiled. "And like men who dig for it without being asked." The first real crisis came at the end of the third month, when a rider arrived from the south with news that the downstream rancher, a human named Cormac who controlled a vast spread of grazing land, had dammed the outflow channel where it left clan territory. Vincent and Mira rode south with Kelda and 3 other clan members, pushing their horses hard. They found the dam exactly where the rider had described. A crude but effective barrier of stone and timber thrown across the channel at the boundary marker, backing up water into a spreading pool on clan land. Cormac was waiting for them, seated on a fine bay horse and flanked by half a dozen men armed with rifles. He was a big man, red-faced and prosperous, wearing the confident sneer of someone who knew the law was on his side. "Kelda," he said, nodding to the elder, "you are looking well." "Cormac." "You have blocked our water." "My water," Cormac corrected. "That aquifer runs under my land as much as yours. Hell, more mine than yours. You have no legal claim to it." "We have prior use," Kelda said, her voice hard. "Our herds have grazed this land for 200 years. Prior use does not mean ownership. I have the deed to the land downstream. That aquifer flows under my property. By territorial law, I have rights to it. You want water, you pay me for water." Vincent moved his horse forward, ignoring Mira's hiss of warning. "The aquifer is under clan land." The well is on clan land. The outflow is managed by the clan. You have no legal claim to water that originates in someone else's territory. Cormac's eyes narrowed. And who are you, Vincent Frost? I opened the well. Ah, the dowser, I have heard about you. People say you have gone native, living with the greenskins, sleeping in their tents. You should be more careful about your associations, Frost. It does not look good. Vincent felt the anger rise hot in his chest, but he kept his voice level. The water originates on clan land and it is under clan management. Damming it is theft. Prove it. Cormac leaned forward in his saddle, his smile nasty. Take it to the water court if you like, but until a judge says otherwise, this dam stays. And I will be charging a fee for every gallon that crosses my land. Fair is fair. Kelda's hand moved to the knife at her belt, and for a moment Vincent thought violence was inevitable. Then Mira spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. We will take it to water court. We will prove our claim and you will remove the dam and pay damages for the water you have stolen. Cormac laughed. Good luck with that, girl. Courts do not tend to favor orcs over humans, but you go ahead and try. In the meantime, I am keeping what is mine. They rode back to camp in grim silence. When they dismounted, Kelda turned to Vincent with an expression of weary frustration. He is right about one thing. The courts do not favor us. We have lost every legal challenge we have brought in the past decade. The judges are human, the laws are human, and we are orcs. They will rule for Cormac because he is one of them. Not every judge, Vincent said, though he knew the odds were bad. And we have a strong case. Prior use is recognized in water law. We can prove the well is on clan land, that the aquifer originates here, that the outflow is a result of clan labor. We can win this. You do not know what you are asking, Mira said, and her voice was tired. Water Court is in the territorial capital. That is a week's ride. We would need to bring evidence, witnesses, documentation. We would need to hire a lawyer who would be willing to take an orc case. We would need to trust that human justice will be just. That is a great deal of trust for a people who have learned not to give it. Vincent looked around the circle of faces, saw the defeat there, the old familiar resignation of people who had been beaten down too many times. He thought of the water, clean and cold and rising from stone, and the channels they had built, and the green spreading across land that had been dying. He thought of Mira, standing in the dust and offering to bear his sons because her people owed a debt they could not pay. I will go, he said. I will bring the case. I am human. I am the dowser who opened the well, and I am a witness to every aspect of this project. Let me go to water court and fight this. Kelda shook her head. You do not owe us this. Yes, Vincent said quietly. I do, not as a debt, as a choice. Let me do this. Mira was staring at him, her eyes wide. You would fight for us. In front of human judges against a wealthy rancher for an orc clan. I would fight for what is right, Vincent said. And this is right. The silence that followed was broken by Kelda's long exhale. Very well, Dowser, you will go to water court and you will make our case. But not alone. Mira will go with you. She knows the history, the clan's claim, and she speaks better than most. Together you will make the best case we can. Mira opened her mouth to protest, then closed it and nodded. I will go. They left 3 days later after frantic preparation. Vincent drafted a written claim, documenting the location of the well, the source of the aquifer, the timeline of development, and the clan's investment of labor. Kelda provided maps, old treaties, and letters from previous territorial governors recognizing the clan's grazing rights. They packed supplies for 2 weeks of travel, loaded saddlebags with evidence, and said their farewells to a clan that watched them ride out with expressions somewhere between hope and resignation. The ride to the capital was long and mostly silent. They pushed hard, stopping only when the horses needed rest, camping rough under the stars. Mira was withdrawn, her face set in grim determination, and Vincent did not push her to talk. They were riding into human territory, into a world where she would be judged by the color of her skin and the shape of her tusks before anyone heard a word she said. On the fourth night, camped in a grove of cottonwoods beside a dying stream, Mira finally broke the silence. "Why are you doing this, Vincent?" He looked up from the small fire he was tending. "I told you, it is right." "That is not enough. Lots of things are right and people do not fight for them. You could walk away from this. You could finish your season of work, take your payment in goods and disappear back into human lands. No one would blame you. But instead, you are riding into a legal battle against a man who has money and influence for people who are not your own. Why?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "When I was 12, he said slowly, there was a drought in my valley, not like yours, but bad enough. The wells started to fail and people were scared. A water witch came through, an old woman who charged too much and promised more than she could deliver. My father wanted to hire her, but we could not afford it. So I started reading every book I could find about water, about geology, about how to find aquifers. I taught myself to dowse with a forked stick, and I found water for our farm. Just a trickle, but enough. And then I found water for the neighbors, and then for the whole valley. And I learned that finding water, giving it to people who needed it, was the best feeling I had ever known. Better than praise, better than payment. Knowing that people would not go thirsty because of something I did, that was enough. That is still enough." Mira was watching him with an expression he could not read. "You are a good man, Vincent Frost." "I am a stubborn man who likes solving problems," Vincent corrected. "But thank you. Will you answer me one more question? Honestly." "I will try. When you refused me, when you took my hand instead of accepting the debt, was it because you did not find me attractive?" "Because I would understand that. I am not soft or pretty. I am tall and plain, and my hands are calloused and my tusks are too prominent. I know what I am, but I need to know if that is why you refused." Vincent stood and walked around the fire to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Mira," he said gently, "you are not plain. You are striking. You have the kind of beauty that sneaks up on a man, that gets stronger every time he looks. Your strength is attractive. Your intelligence is attractive. The way you argue with me about channel grades is attractive. The way you laugh when you think no one is listening is attractive. I refused the debt because I wanted you to choose freely, not because I did not want you. I have wanted you since the day you yelled at me about soil erosion, if I am being honest. But I wanted you to want me back for my own sake, not because your grandmother said you had to." Mira was very still. Then, slowly, she leaned her shoulder against his. "That is a good answer," she said quietly. They sat like that for a long time, shoulder to shoulder, watching the fire burn down to embers. When they finally turned in, Vincent's heart was lighter than it had been in months. The territorial capital was a sprawling town of adobe and timber, bustling with trade and noise, and the kind of casual diversity that came from being a crossroads. Humans dominated, but there were dwarves working the smithies, a few elves running a silversmith shop, and even a handful of other orcs moving through the market. Mira relaxed fractionally when she saw them, her shoulders easing from the rigid tension that had held her since they rode into town. The water court met twice monthly in a building near the center of town, a low structure of whitewashed adobe with a tile roof and narrow windows. Vincent and Mira presented themselves to the clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers who looked them over with ill-concealed skepticism. "You are filing a water rights claim?" "Yes, against Cormac the rancher. He has dammed an outflow channel that originates on clan territory. The clerk's eyebrows rose. Cormac has a prior claim to that aquifer, filed 6 months ago. He cannot claim an aquifer that does not flow under his land, Vincent said firmly. The well is on clan territory. The aquifer originates there. We have maps, documentation, and witness testimony. The judge will hear your case, but I will tell you now, you are wasting your time. Cormac has a good lawyer and the law favors established property rights. Then let us establish our property rights, Mira said, her voice cold. When can we see the judge? Court is in 3 days. Be here at dawn, and I would advise you to find a lawyer. You will need one. Finding a lawyer willing to take an orc case proved harder than Vincent had anticipated. The first 3 they approached turned them down flat, citing conflicts of interest or schedule issues, or in one painfully honest case, the simple fact that they did not believe they could win. The 4th lawyer, a young woman named Sarah who had just passed the territorial bar, listened to their case and frowned. You have a legitimate claim, she said slowly. Prior use is a strong argument, and if you can prove the aquifer originates on clan land, you should win. But Cormac is going to argue that the aquifer extends under his property, which gives him co-equal rights, and he has money and influence and you are orcs. No offense, but that matters. So you will not take the case, Mira said flatly. I did not say that. Sarah grinned. I said it would be hard, but I am new, I need cases, and I am tired of wealthy ranchers acting like they own the territory. Let me see your evidence. They spent 2 days preparing. Sarah was thorough, asking questions Vincent had not thought to anticipate, poking holes in their timeline, demanding more documentation. She sent them back to find a surveyor who could confirm the well's location, to get written statements from clan members, to track down old water surveys that showed the historical flow patterns. It was exhausting, frustrating work, but by the time they walked into the courtroom, Vincent felt they had a real chance. The judge was a gray-haired man named Holbrook, with a face like weathered granite and eyes that gave away nothing. Cormac sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, a smooth man in an expensive suit who looked bored. Vincent, Mira, and Sarah sat opposite, their evidence stacked in neat folders. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Sarah presented their case with methodical precision, walking the judge through maps and surveys, calling Vincent to testify about the well and the aquifer, calling Mira to testify about the clan's historical use of the grazing lands. Cormac's lawyer tried to paint the clan as recent arrivals, squatters with no legitimate claim, and tried to paint Vincent as a dupe who had been taken in by orc manipulation. It was during cross-examination, when Cormac's lawyer suggested that Vincent had been unduly influenced by living among orcs, that Mira stood up. Objection, she said, her voice ringing in the quiet courtroom. The judge looked at her. You are not a lawyer, miss. No, but I am a person with eyes and ears, and I have heard enough. This man, she pointed at Cormac's lawyer, is trying to make this case about race, about whether orcs deserve water or legal protection. But this is a simple property case. The well is on our land. The aquifer originates under our land. We did the work to open it. We have prior use going back generations. If a human clan had done the same, you would rule for them without hesitation. The question is whether you will apply the law equally, or whether you will let prejudice decide. The courtroom was silent. The judge's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Sit down, miss. I will decide what this case is about. Mira sat, and Sarah gave her a look that was equal parts exasperation and admiration. When both sides had rested, the judge called for a recess and retired to his chambers. Vincent, Mira, and Sarah waited in the hallway, too tense to talk. Cormac and his lawyer waited on the opposite side, radiating confidence. After an hour, the clerk called them back in. Judge Holbrook looked tired. He surveyed the courtroom, let the silence draw out, and then spoke. This court finds that the aquifer in question originates under land held by treaty right by the Orc clan led by Elder Kelda. The well was opened through the labor and expertise of Vincent Frost, acting on behalf of the clan. The outflow channel was constructed on clan land and represents significant investment of resources. Prior use is established and documented. Cormac's claim to the aquifer is denied. He will remove the dam within 10 days and will pay damages to the clan in the amount of $500 for water withheld. This court recognizes the clan's exclusive right to the aquifer and the water it produces. Case closed. The gavel fell, and Vincent felt Mira's hand find his under the table, her grip fierce and shaking. They rode back to clan territory with the court's written decision in Vincent's saddlebag and a banker's draft for $500 that felt like a fortune. Mira was quiet for most of the journey, but it was a different kind of quiet, lighter and edged with something that might have been joy. On the last night before they reached the clan's camp, sitting beside their small fire, she turned to him and said, "I choose you." Vincent looked at her, his heart suddenly loud in his ears. "What? I choose you, Vincent Frost. The season is nearly over, the work is almost done, and the debt will be judged settled. But I choose you anyway, not because I have to, but because I want to. You are stubborn and strange, and you argue with me about everything, but you rode into water court for my people, and you treated me like an equal when no one else did. So I choose you, if you still want to be chosen." Vincent reached out and took her hand, the same way he had that first day, and this time when he held it, he did not let go. "I choose you too, Mira Kelstrath. I have been choosing you for months. I just did not know if you wanted to be chosen." She leaned forward and kissed him, a brief, fierce press of lips that tasted like dust and hope, and when she pulled back her eyes were bright. "Then we will tell grandmother when we get home, and you will marry me properly with both our customs, so there is no question about debts or obligations." "Just choice. Just choice," Vincent agreed and kissed her again. They reached the clan's camp at sunset the next day, riding in to find the whole clan gathered and waiting. Kelda stood at the center, her face unreadable, and the silence was heavy with expectation. Vincent dismounted and walked forward, pulling the court decision from his saddlebag. "We won," he said simply, and handed the paper to Kelda. She read it slowly, her lips moving, and then she looked up with an expression of stunned disbelief. "They ruled for us." "They ruled for the law," Mira said, coming to stand beside Vincent. "Prior use, documented claim, treaty rights. We had the better case, and the judge was honest enough to see it." Kelda read the decision again, and then a third time, as if expecting the words to change. When she finally looked up, there were tears on her cheeks. "You did this. Both of you. You fought for us in their court with their law, and you won." "We won together," Vincent said. "And there is more. Cormac has to remove the dam and pay damages, $500. The water is ours, legally recognized, protected." The celebration that followed was loud and long, with food and music and toasts that went on late into the night. Vincent found himself passed from group to group, his back slapped, his hands shaken, his name called in accents that made it sound like something new. But through it all, he kept finding Mira's eyes across the fire, and the look she gave him was worth more than any celebration. When the noise finally died down and people began to drift toward their tents, Kelda called Vincent and Mira aside. She looked between them, her expression shrewd. "The season is nearly over. The cistern is almost complete. The work you promised has been done, and done well. The debt is settled, dowser. You are free to leave with our gratitude or to stay as a friend of the clan. What do you choose? I choose to stay, Vincent said. And I choose to ask formally by your custom and mine for Mira's hand in marriage. Not as payment, not as settlement, but as a free choice by two people who want to build a life together. Kelda's smile was slow and warm. And you, granddaughter, what do you choose? I choose him, Mira said. I choose a life together on this land with these people. I choose to build something new. Kelda nodded slowly. Then the debt is closed and a new bond begins. We will hold the wedding when the cistern is dedicated so that the whole clan can witness both. The water you found, Vincent Frost, has given us more than life. It has given us hope and a future and a bridge between peoples. That is worth celebrating properly. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of final construction and preparation. The cistern was completed, a massive stone structure that could hold enough water to see the clan through any drought. The channels were finished, the headgates installed, the whole system tested and proven sound. And alongside the practical work, the clan prepared for a wedding. Mira's family brought out clothing that had been stored for generations. Fine leather and woven wool dyed in deep colors. Vincent's contribution was a simple gold band he had commissioned from a metalsmith in the capital, plain and strong and engraved on the inside with both their names. The clanswomen taught him the Orc wedding customs, the responses he would need to make, the symbolic gestures of binding and commitment. Mira learned the human customs from Vincent, the exchange of vows, the ring, the kiss that sealed the bond. They decided to blend both traditions, to honor both heritages and make something new. The dedication of the cistern was held on a clear autumn day when the light lay golden across the grassland, and the air smelled of sage and distant rain. The whole clan gathered, along with representatives from 2 neighboring clans who had heard of the project and come to see it for themselves. Kelda stood on the rim of the cistern and spoke about water and survival, about gifts freely given, and about the dowser who had walked into their dying land and opened a vein of life. Vincent stood beside Mira and felt the weight of what they had accomplished. Not just the water, but the bridge they had begun to build between peoples who had too long seen each other as strangers. When the dedication was finished and water was formally released into the cistern, filling it in a rush of cold, clear abundance, the crowd cheered. And then, Kelda raised her hand for silence and announced that there would be a second ceremony, one that would close the debt forever and open a new chapter. The wedding was held as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and deep purple. A circle was drawn in the dust, large enough to hold the couple and the elders who would officiate. Vincent and Mira entered from opposite sides, walking slowly, and met in the center. Kelda spoke first, her voice carrying across the gathered clan. Mira Kelstrath, granddaughter of my blood, do you come to this circle freely? I come freely, Mira said, her voice steady. Vincent Frost, dowser and friend, do you come to this circle freely? I come freely, Vincent said. Then, by the custom of our people, let the bond be made. Kelda produced a length of braided cord, red and green intertwined, and wrapped it around their joined hands. You are bound by choice, not by debt. You are bound by love, not by obligation. What you build together will be yours, and your children will belong to both peoples, free and honored. Do you accept this bond? I accept, Mira said. I accept, Vincent said. Then Sarah, who had ridden north to witness the wedding, stepped forward with a human prayer book and a smile. By the authority vested in me by the territorial government, I am also authorized to perform civil marriages. So let us do this properly. Vincent, you take Mira to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live." "I do," Vincent said, and slid the gold band onto Mira's finger. "Mira, do you take Vincent to be your lawfully wedded husband under the same terms?" "I do," Mira said, and accepted the second ring that Vincent had commissioned, simpler and smaller but engraved with the same care. "Then, by the power vested in me, and by the customs of two peoples, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Vincent." Vincent pulled Mira close and kissed her as the clan erupted in cheers and applause. She kissed him back, fierce and joyful, and when they broke apart she was laughing, her eyes bright with tears. The celebration that followed went on long into the night, with food and music and dancing that blended human and orc traditions into something entirely new. Vincent danced with Mira until his feet ached, ate food he could not name but that tasted of spice and smoke and celebration, and accepted congratulations from people who called him brother and friend. Late in the night, when the fires had burned low and the music had softened to a gentle hum, Vincent and Mira slipped away to the tent that had been prepared for them, larger and more private than his old quarters. Inside there were blankets and cushions, a small brazier for warmth, and the quiet knowledge that they were finally, truly alone together. Mira turned to face him, suddenly shy. "I am glad you refused the debt," she said quietly. "I am glad you made me choose. This is better. This is real." Vincent took her hands, marveling at the gold band on her finger. "This is real," he agreed, "and I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Mira said, and pulled him down into the blankets, and the rest of the night was theirs alone. The winter that followed was mild, and the grassland stayed green far longer than usual, fed by the steady flow of water from the cistern. Vincent and Mira settled into married life, building a small house of stone and timber near the well site, positioned to overlook the channels they had built together. It was not a large house, but it was sturdy and warm, with windows that caught the morning sun and a hearth that drew properly. Vincent continued to work with the clan, maintaining the water system, training others in the principles of well digging and dowsing, sharing knowledge that had been his alone. Mira worked alongside him, managing the herds and teaching the children about the land and its secrets. They were partners in every sense, their lives intertwined in work and in love. The first spring after their wedding, Mira told him she was pregnant. Vincent received the news with a joy so fierce it frightened him, and immediately began worrying about every possible thing that could go wrong. Mira laughed at him, called him ridiculous, and went about her work with the same steady competence she brought to everything. Their son was born in late autumn, a healthy baby with his mother's green skin and his father's eyes. They named him Ronan, a name that belonged to neither culture entirely and so belonged to both. He was loud and demanding and perfect, and Vincent spent his first month of fatherhood exhausted and amazed in equal measure. Kelda held the baby and smiled. "He is beautiful. And he is the future, this child. Human and orc, born free, born into a world where water runs clean and people work together. You have given us more than you know, Vincent Frost." "We gave each other something," Vincent said, watching Mira cradle their son. "I found water, but I found a home too. That is worth more than any well." The years that followed were good ones. The water system expanded. Other clans came to see the project and asked for help with their own lands, and Vincent found himself traveling again, but always with Mira at his side. They dug wells across the high desert, opened aquifers that had been lost, taught communities how to manage their water wisely. They became known, the human dowser and the orc herder who had built a bridge between worlds one channel at a time. They had a second son, Isaac, 2 years after Ronan, and a third, Thomas, 3 years after that. The little house by the well grew crowded and loud and full of life. The boys grew up bilingual, learning both human and orc customs, comfortable in two worlds and limited by neither. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent and Mira stood on the rim of the original well and looked out across the green grassland that stretched to the horizon. The channels they had built were now bordered by willows and cottonwoods, trees that had taken root in the reliable water and grown tall. The herds were fat and numerous, the clan was prosperous, and the tensions between humans and orcs in the region had eased as more people saw what cooperation could build. "You ever regret it?" Mira asked quietly. "Refusing the debt all those years ago, making everything so complicated?" Vincent turned to her, this woman he had chosen and who had chosen him, and smiled. "Not once. You were never a debt, Mira. You were always a gift. I just had to wait for you to realize it." She laughed and leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "You are still a strange man, Vincent Frost. And you are still stubborn, Mira Frost. Good. We balance each other." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that had no names, and watched their sons playing by the cistern, chasing each other with the careless joy of children who had never known drought or want. The water flowed clean and cold and constant, a testament to vision and labor and the choice to build rather than to take. Vincent thought about the day he had sat at the bottom of a failed well and heard the whisper of hidden water, the day he had started laughing because he knew he had found something worth finding. He had been right, but not in the way he expected. The water had been there, yes, deep and abundant and waiting to be opened. But the real discovery had been Mira, had been the clan, had been the life they had built together in this high desert country where the grass grew green and the future felt possible. Mira squeezed his hand. "What are you thinking?" "That I am happy," Vincent said simply. "That I found what I was looking for, even though I did not know I was looking for it. That this is enough." "More than enough," Mira agreed. "This is everything." And standing there on the rim of the well with the woman he loved and the life they had built spread out before them, Vincent Frost knew that she was right. He had come to this land chasing water and found a home. He had offered partnership instead of ownership and received love in return. He had taken her hand instead of accepting the debt, and in doing so had gained everything worth having. The water flowed, the grass grew, and the children laughed in the gathering dusk. It was not the ending he had imagined when he first arrived in this dying land, but it was the right one, the true one, the one that mattered. He had found water, yes, but more importantly, he had found where he belonged, and that was the greatest discovery of all.